from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Round Table. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Buenos días, good morning, señores oyentes de Úsala Radio. Estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Pastor Phil Fisher at the controls, and we have news from the city, from the state, from Washington, D.C., from Kabul, from Haiti. Afghanistan is a total mess. That withdrawal that was supposed to be orderly. We had been told that there wouldn't be anything happening here like happened with Vietnam. We have, those of us who were around then, have vivid images of that embassy roof and the helicopter and people hanging from the sides of the helicopter. That's happening in Kabul as we speak. Civilians invaded the airport. This airport has two parts. There's a military part of the airport and there's a civilian part. The military part is protected, I suppose, at this point, even though they were under attack. The embassy had moved personnel to the airport in order for them to operate safely. But now the embassy also has warnings that there are fireworks at the airport, so not the nice fireworks, but real guns. So we don't know what's happening in Kabul. I mean, the president left. He escaped. He went to Tajikistan, neighboring country. And I think he said that he did not want any bloodshed, but sort of, I don't understand. He should have been there waiting for the Taliban saying, I'm here, what do you want? But he didn't. He left. He ran away. And I don't know, the Afghanis, this is 20 years of U.S. commitment to Afghanistan. 20 years. Many presidents, I mean, since then, had talked about getting us out of Afghanistan, that this would be a controlled engagement, blah, blah, blah. And then during other times, Bush and Obama, and then Trump promised to take the troops out of Afghanistan. Biden said he refused to pass this problem on to the next president. So he took a step that is quite radical and quite controversial. There are many people in his party that are opposed to it. So, but here's what I have here, the notes I have. The Taliban is retaking Afghanistan. The Islamist group wants to rebuild, and they have specific wishes about how to control the country. We have seen pictures already, with some video already, of what they intend to do. It's a fundamentalist force. They want to install the Sharia law. They blitzed across the country, overran one city after another, entered Kabul on Sunday morning. The Taliban's swift advance came as the U.S. prepared to withdraw the last of its troops, though some American soldiers were sent from elsewhere in the region to protect the U.S. Embassy and the Kabul airport over the weekend. Negotiators representing the national government were in talks with the Taliban's political leadership on Sunday about an agreement on a transitional administration. I don't think there's going to be any transitional administration. The uh, country is right now in the hands of the Taliban. They're not speaking to anyone, they're just taking over the place. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani left the country on Sunday in a sign that the government had collapsed. And personnel at the US Embassy in Kabul were moved to the airport to ensure they can operate safely. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said on Sunday the embassy later warned of reports that the airport was taking fire. What is the Taliban? This group that is now back in power. I mean, the United States had moved against them. Uh, they were one of the reasons they were attacked is because they supposedly have been allies of Osama bin Laden, our number one enemy in the region. But anyway, the Taliban first rose to power in Afghanistan in the 1990s, formed by guerrilla fighters who drove out Soviet forces in the previous decade with support from the CIA and Pakistani intelligence services. Most of their members are Pashtuns, the largest ethnic group in the country. The name uh, Taliban means students in Pashto. These are not really students. Remember the Iranian embassy when students, quote unquote, students took over the embassy in Tehran, the U.S. embassy, um, and they were not really students. They were just militants using that as a label. The founder of the group, Mohammad Omar, a commander in the anti Soviet resistance, launched the movement in 1994 to secure the southeastern city of Kandahar, which was plagued by crime and violence. The Taliban's vision of justice helped it amass power. At the time, people really wanted law and order, and there was none, said Kamran Bokhari in the New Line Institute, a foreign policy think tank. In the fall of 1996, the Taliban seized Kabul and declared Afghanistan an Islamic emirate. Think about that. Another Islamic stronghold, an Islamic emirate. Taliban rule was brutal and repressive. As we know, women in this Taliban culture have no rights. At that point, when they took over, the women were barred from education and forced to wear clothing that completely covered them. Music and other forms of media were banned. And now we have seen already video of salons where people go to have their hair done, nails done. They are being dismounted, the signs are being destroyed. That is anathema to Taliban culture. So that's a brief synopsis of who they are and what they are about. They are brutal, they are repressive, they are violent, they kill people, they imprison people, they rape women. So that's not fiction. That has happened before and apparently is happening at this point. What surprised everybody was the speed in which they moved through the country and how fast they arrived in Kabul. I think they surprised everybody in the Biden administration, especially because, well, and now at this point, we have some people in this country, supporters of Biden, who are saying this was the wrong thing to do. On the other hand, if we allow ourselves a brief commentary here, this was a conflict that grew uh, out of the 2001 the attack in New York, organized by Osama bin Laden. So Iraq and Afghanistan were the targets, and here we are 20 years later in Afghanistan. This is what's happening. We took over the place. We gave women and many Afghanis hope that they would have a future, that they would have a democratic nation, especially for girls, giving them a chance to go to school. And for some reason, for the Taliban, uh, getting women educated is not something on the agenda for them. They are really strongly opposed to education for women. So it's one of those cultural things that will immediately we will see the effects of that. So many young women and professional women who are already we're already thinking of a lifetime of progress and jobs and the future, high school, college, university degrees, jobs for women in research as doctors, as lawyers, as engineers, and all that has gone by the wayside. That's not going to happen in Afghanistan as the Taliban move in. The swiftness of their troop movements throughout the country. Uh, when I was watching one of the segments in the news, you can see how quickly this what they had the color red to show how they spread quickly. You could see it's like when they show you the weather and they show the rain or a storm and the snow as it arrives, or a hurricane and the winds and all that. That when they arrive into a region, well, that's how it looked on the map as the Taliban took over uh, Afghanistan, and they walked into Kabul, and the president ran away. And so that is the situation in that country. And I hope we have given you a brief synopsis of uh, who these people are and what they are doing. We're going to take a brief break here in Usala Radio. Les habla Fernando Mendez, Pastor Phil at the controls. We come back in a minute. Señores oyentes de Usala Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Round Table. Les habla Fernando Mendez, Pastor Phil at the controls, and we just had a brief segment on the situation in Afghanistan, which is a very dire situation at this point. But we have news from our part of the world. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and so on. So we have from city and state, Lehigh Township's adoption of an election integrity resolution in May shows how Donald Trump's lies can hijack local politics and government. That is a report from the Philadelphia Inquirer. So Lehigh Township's adoption of an election integrity resolution in May. Experts say the race to succeed U.S. Senator Pat Toomey could be won in areas outside of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette reports. The state's population shift mirrors national trends, showing growth in denser, diverse, and generally more liberal areas, while conservative rural regions shrink but retain power due to disproportionate representation. That's a report from the Philadelphia Inquirer. And we spoke briefly about this when we mentioned this census, the results of the 2020 census, which is something we're now able to read. It takes a long time to collate all the information and begin an organized presentation. So now we know um, the population of Philadelphia, the Hispanic population grew. Uh, Black population went down in numbers. The white population went down, and we we use that because we're not alone. It's throughout the country. There are more brown people, more Hispanics, more Asians uh, in this country, and we use that to illustrate what it means in terms of the politics of this country, what has happened, and it is evident from the results of the census that the country, the country's ethnic composition is changing, and one of the fears of the dominant group, white males, well, there's some females too, but that they're afraid of what is happening. And Donald Trump sort of channeled that all that information and has been exploiting the fears of this the white people that the country is becoming uh, leaning left socialist. I mean, and he accuses all the immigrants of just uh, being more numbers for the Democratic Party, and so that's one of the reasons for their opposition to immigration. They oppose DACA for the same reason. Uh, but Biden, one of the first steps he took was to protect DACA. The young people who've been in this country through no fault of their own, but that now have a chance, a renewed chance at remaining here and contributing to this country, to the economy and the education and the culture of this country, because Biden has given them a second life. There's more every day. Every day, there's one more item about how Trump was plotting to take over this country and to keep himself in power. As much as we try to get away from the Trump news about Trump, he just won't leave. So anyway, so that's the point here, that the population of the state, it mirrors a national trend. La población del estado de Pensilvania refleja un movimiento nacional hacia el crecimiento en áreas que son más densas, más diversas y generalmente más liberales, mientras que las regiones conservadoras del país, rurales, han disminuido en tamaño, pero aquí está el problema, todavía tienen el poder debido a la representación desproporcionada. Y esto es lo que hay que averiguar. ¿Por qué continúa esto? Entonces, pues ahí está esto que llaman gerrymandering. Y mientras los republicanos están en control de las legislaturas a través del país, ellos pueden controlar el diseño de ciertos distritos para mantenerse en el poder. So, that's what I was saying in Spanish, is that this population shift in denser, diverse, and generally more liberal areas, and the conservative regions are shrinking, but they retain power due to gerrymandering, due to the ability of the legislatures to shape the districts and the regions so that they somehow stay in power. But I don't know how long that trick can continue if in reality the numbers eventually the numbers will reflect what the population is and how we should be represented in Washington. Delaying labor talks is a classic strategy in union negotiations, and it seems to be at play in Pittsburgh area hospitals. Okay, this is not a moment to do that, please. We have a pandemic. We have a very serious crisis, healthcare crisis, and this is not the time to play those games. But I understand these unions that represent nurses and hospital workers may have their reasons to stage some strikes or simply question the actions of the bosses. More than 1 million jobless Pennsylvanians received temporary aid. 1 million jobless Pennsylvanians received temporary aid. That's one of the things that as many employers right now are looking at, the labor force. When are they coming back to work in restaurants and other things? And as long as those checks that the government is sending, they continue to come, they will not report to work. But those checks supposedly are coming to an end. But more than 500,000 jobless Pennsylvanians received temporary aid, and 3 federal unemployment programs will see those checks end as of September 4th. So that's a report from the Tribune Review. A year after Philadelphia officials pledged to offer free internet to 35,000 low-income families, they are expected to announce today they have thus far connected about 18,720 with plans to include new households through grassroots outreach. That's a report from the Philadelphia Inquirer also. The Reading City Council asked the Environmental Advisory Council to look into enacting a potential plastic bag ban after the state's moratorium on bans from 2019 recently expired. State Senator Kate Muth and Representative Carol Hill Evans are proposing property tax and rent relief programs for recently discharged veterans. Support that. Stevens Mann, who served as an official in East Cocalico Township, has been charged after he was seen on video entering the U.S. Capitol during the January 6th insurrection, according to the FBI. Well, see, we keep seeing this. And guess what? Another one of those items about the insurrection just appeared because that distinguished senator from Texas, Mr. Ted Cruz, just stated something that is plainly wrong, and it was said in support of sort of Donald Trump, and is catering to that base of the Republican Party that we really I don't know. It just continues. He says, Ted Cruz says that the January 6th insurrectionists were peaceful supporters of the party no longer in power. In other words, they were exercising their legal right to demonstrate. Republican Senator Ted Cruz told the Huffington Post this week that he absolutely wants the Capitol rioters who abused police officers to be arrested, but the rest of them were just peaceful supporters. They were not peaceful supporters. I mean, that's the same lie that Donald Trump has been telling, that there was love and hugs and kisses and all that. At that point, I have not seen, and I have seen hours of videos, different sources from people who provided them to the government, from the FBI investigation, And at no point do you see, at no point, there's not one scene in which there's a hug or a kiss or an exchange of handshakes. This was a riot. It was a demonstration uh, dedicated to stopping the vote count, to the certification of the vote, uh, which was being carried out by the vice president and the legislators. And at no point there is anything peaceful that occurred that day. It was a violent demonstration. People attacked with sticks, with flags, with anything they could find. And we already have the testimony of officers who appeared before Congress to tell us what happened that day. And not one of those, and there's only a sample, because there were many officers who were hurt, were seriously injured that day, defending the Capitol, defending democracy, and to have some asinine senator, Ted Cruz, Cancun Cruz. Remember, he left the state when they had the biggest crisis. They froze because of some failures of the administration. And what did he do? Ted Cruz left the state. He went to Cancun. So, and now he's preaching about how the people who staged the riot on January 6th were peaceful people. He says that some of them were rioters. No, all of them. Some of them may not have actively attacked anybody, but they certainly were part of the bunch that invaded the Capitol, and that is against the law already. So these were not peaceful people. They were not people spreading love and tenderness. So, well, we're going to take another brief break here in Usa la Radio. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Pastor Phil at the controls. Regresamos en un minuto.
I know kids worry about a lot of things. Getting enough food to eat shouldn't be one of them. Through a nationwide network of food banks, Feeding America serves virtually every community in the United States. See how you can help your community. Visit feedingamerica.org.
Señores oyentes de USA la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Pastor Phil at the controls. I was talking about Ted Cruz and his ridiculous statement that these were peaceful people who invaded the Capitol on January 6, 2021, a day that shall live in infamy. Remember that phrase? That came from Roosevelt. And it was about December 7, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, a day that shall live in infamy. Now we have another day that shall live in infamy. Forever we shall remember January 6th, a coup attempt, a coup d'etat, un golpe de Estado by Mr. Trump and his compinches. So, yeah, January 6th was not a peaceful day. So, I said, that's what Ted Cruz said. But then Chris Murphy, Senator Murphy, answered him. And he said this: yesterday, I listened to a speech by Senator Cruz from Texas, and it deserves a response. The GOP didn't want to talk about what is going on with the economy, the infrastructure bill, the growth in jobs, and even the upsurge in COVID-19 with the Delta variant. The worry is that with so many Americans remaining unvaccinated, the CDC says we have to recommend that fully vaccinated people wear a mask in public places. And at the same time, for children and schools also, is a request. It is legitimate to contest the decision, but it is not what Senator Cruz did. He didn't argue about the merits of the CDC new guidance. CDC is asking us to wear masks again in public places, in crowded places, even if we're vaccinated. And they have done it based on their science, based on the knowledge they have of how the COVID-19 spreads and this variant that is so contagious. But he didn't argue, Cruz didn't argue about that, about the merits of the new guidance. He claimed the CDC offered no explanation. Not true. The CDC explained why. Why did CDC issue a new guidance? Who knows, said Cruz, and then said he knew the reasons, and it is that the CDC is one arm of the Democratic Party. So again, another lie. The CDC is doing what it's doing, suggesting the use of masks. And it may be controversial in some quarters. Maybe not everybody needs to wear a mask. If you feel that you are fully vaccinated and you protected and so on, people who already had COVID and are vaccinated are very protected. But the CDC is based on the fact, the decision is based on the fact that this new variant, Delta, is more contagious, spreads more easily, and as kids are returning to school, they are hoping that the schools will require masks. And this is a CDC recommendation. So they had reasons for that. Not that they were doing it out of I don't know, the political necessity. Why the CDC doesn't operate that way. Trump made all these decisions about healthcare. He made them political. That's not what we're doing right now. They are not a part of the Democratic Party. They are not an arm of the party. The CDC is scientists, doctors. These are researchers. These are people who are concerned about our health. It's not about politics, Senator Cruz. No, the sun must have hit you hard in Cancun. So this senator responded to him, Murphy, and he said his statement, because he also said without any evidence that the CDC issued new guidance commanded by the union bosses. That is an insult to the professionals of the CDC, epidemiologists, and doctors who are trying to keep our country safe. What the GOP politicians are doing is creating more uncertainty. Well, that's for sure. Speaking of uncertainty, how about this? Trump again. Remember the Black Lives Matter demonstrations? There was some vandalism. There was, some. There's no one is going to condone the violence during those times. But here's Trump's one regret. He says he regrets not calling the military immediately to quell the Black Lives Matter protests last summer. Trump says there was a lot of love on January 6th in the invasion of the Capitol, hugs and kisses. But he wanted to send the military against the Black people who were demonstrating last summer. This is an answer from Professor Eddie Glaub, who frequently appears on MSNBC. He says, Trump is silly. He is not very bright, and it puzzles me why people follow him. It puzzles me. I agree with Professor Glaub. It puzzles me. why supposedly smart people on the Republican party, there were many smart senators and congressmen, governors and intellectuals, thinkers, not at Fox News, but elsewhere. Why, why was Donald Trump um, allowed to run as a candidate of the GOP when he presented no platform, no ideas? What was he going to do? This is my plan if I become president in 2020, if I am reelected. There was nothing, there was no platform. It was just the plan was Trump comes back to power. And, with hopefully, at that point, they were also hoping in control of Congress, in control of the House. That's what they were planning. Why? Would anybody explain why this man, so ethically challenged, intellectually challenged, even his emotional IQ is low. He has no sympathy for the poor, no empathy. He has no understanding of pain and suffering. His one single obsession is to have power and to use that power to enrich himself and his family. But here we are again. This man is out of power and yet not out of our lives. Not retired quietly in his palace in Mar-a-Lago. No. Apparently he parades every evening so he gets applause because he needs that. He needs that applause. His ego needs to be fed every day. So he goes to his dinner guests at Mar-a-Lago to receive applause and to occasionally add to the list of outrageous remarks he's made throughout his political life. Why? Somebody. I remember there was a book, Nixon Agonistas. I forgot who the author was, but it was an in-depth study of Nixon's character. Somebody should do a Trump Agonistas. Study this sick man. Give us an answer as to how was it possible for 73 million people to follow this idiot? How was it possible for 73 million people to decide that the future of this country should be put in the hands of an egomaniac with no conscience? I remain so angry about this man that's why I return to this topic, no matter which way we try to avoid it. I mean, there's so many things going on right now. A tragedy in Haiti, an earthquake, and then they're waiting to be hit by a hurricane. And their president was assassinated. So they had a political crisis, a health crisis with COVID, an earthquake, and the weather. Almost biblical punishment. I don't know. That's how the Bible sees that. But here we are, still addressing the issue of a man who attempted to destroy our democracy. And we should be paying attention. We should be paying attention to the goings on in the hearings, in the investigation of what happened on January 6th. We should understand what happened, how it happened, who is responsible, because I must remember this injunction from 100 Years of Solitude, Garcia Marquez, who quoted Santayana, the philosopher Santayana, saying that people who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. People who don't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And yet, here we are with a GOP. We have two main political parties. And there is a party that absolutely makes no sense. They sold their conscience, their soul to an ideology, to an icon, to an idol. This is idol worship. But this man has no reason to command respect on any level. Professor Eddie Glauber is right. Trump is silly and he's stupid if you listen to him. Listen to what he said. Listen to his suggestion that we inject some liquid into our veins to fight COVID, or some light to fight it, or that COVID will be gone by April. Listen to any of his remarks on COVID. You know what? One tremendous fear that they had, one of his administration, a highly placed member of his administration, knew about the vaccines. And he was concerned that even though the vaccines were advanced, the research was so advanced, he was afraid that if Trump found out how advanced they were with the vaccines, that he would pressure the companies to release them, and he would start vaccinations without having the full results of the vaccines, without knowing how it affected people, without having full knowledge of when, how, and where they should be applied. In his administration, his health secretary didn't want Trump to know. So, I don't know. We'll continue with this. We're going to take another brief pause here in Usa la Radio. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Pastor Phil at the controls. Welcome back in 1 minute. Well, Pastor Phil is not at the control. I guess our sound man, Pastor Phil, our engineer, has not listened. Or maybe he's fainted in shock at my remarks about the former president, the ex-president, the exile in Mar-a-Lago. I wish he was exiled. I wish he would do like the Afghan president and just run away to Tajikistan. He would have to run away to a place where there is no extradition. That would be good for him. Go to a place where there's no extradition. So, people, I see a crawl message, and it says, don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. No olvides suscribirte a nuestro canal de YouTube. Yes, spread the news. Spread the news. This is a place to be because we provide you good information, clear information. We clarify some of the information that we received in these headlines. And, you know, this is a service to our listeners. You know, the more we have, the more time we have to give you this information and clarify issues for you. So, we already spoke about the Taliban and COVID, Haiti. More than 1,200 people have died and thousands more are injured after a 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck Haiti on Saturday. As I said, look at it's like the seven plagues. First, the president is assassinated, and it creates a political crisis in Haiti. Then COVID-19, obviously, like it has happened everywhere, is an upsurge of cases in Haiti. Then an earthquake, magnitude 7.2, the strongest quake that they have felt. And on top of that, they are waiting for a hurricane to hit. So you have to. This is a case where we need the United States needs to help because we have the power to do it. The weather is crazy. Many schools in Florida's Panhandle are closed because the area is getting ready for Tropical Storm Fred. So the country as a whole, I mean, we are right now under attack by the weather, fires in the west, floods in the southwest, hurricanes coming, and all this while we deal with COVID. It's, Fred, as of this morning, had a sustained wind power speed of 50 miles per hour and is moving towards Florida at 6 miles per hour with an expected landfall in the western panhandle this afternoon. So be ready. The storm is expected to bring dangerous storm surges, river flooding, and possible tornadoes when it reaches the US coast. Fred is one of 3 Atlantic storms now being monitored by the National Hurricane Center. I always wonder what happened, like, 100 years ago, before they had the technology to let people know that all these hurricanes were coming. Maybe there weren't as many, I don't know. But what did people do? All of a sudden, like, the weather would change and hurricane would come and destroy them and catch them by surprise, because that's not happening nowadays. At least we have new technology that enables us to catch those hurricanes as they approach. Another item in the news: China and Russia, the Chinese and Russian militaries have recently teamed up for a series of joint exercises. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's what's happening over there. This has allowed them to observe or test out each other's methods and weaponry. Both countries say the exercises mark a high point in bilateral military relations, but outside experts question whether the countries have a shared motive. One expert called the exercises mostly theater. So we agree, that's probably mostly theater. I don't know what they intend to do with those things. It really is theater. It's for their audience, for the crowd at home. Anyway, and one more thing. The Biden administration. Biden has what they call a cold eye approach to this withdrawal. He knows the consequences are serious for his popularity. So early in his administration, but he promised that he would take the troops out, and he's doing it. Other presidents have promised, from Obama and Trump, and nobody did it, but Biden has just done it. And the consequences are serious for Afghanistan. But here's one thing, as Trump says, as Biden says, 2 more years of U.S. troops in that region would not help to solve the problem. Other critics argue that we have troops all over the world, that this would have been better if we had retained some troops in Afghanistan to keep the country stable. The point is, more than 2,000 of our men and women died in Afghanistan, and Biden made a decision that he didn't want any more of our soldiers to die in that part of the world with no end in sight. So yes, we have troops in places like South Korea and Germany and many other parts of the world, but there was a justification for the troops in Germany. It's part of NATO. And also in that Southeast Asia, we need to have a presence there. I don't know. I guess you could build a case for troops in Afghanistan to keep the Taliban out of power, because they are a very destructive force. They are bad for women, bad for women's education, for women's rights. And so that would be one reason. But I don't know, it's a political imperative for us to stay out of there. The Soviets failed. Many other attempts to invade that country have failed. And they are under the control of the Taliban now, so let's see what happens. I mean, the effects can already be seen, but how people are trying to get out of the country, hanging from airplanes as they are ready to take off, to take Americans and other people out of Afghanistan. It's not an easy decision. We can be certain of that, but it's done. And now Biden and US, we have to deal with the consequences. I'm sure that the politicos in this country, imagine that, the Republicans in this country are going to use that against Joe Biden. You can be sure that you face criticism from Republicans. He already faces some from his own party, a couple of senators, one senator in particular who has experience for having fought in Afghanistan. They feel certain allegiance to people in Afghanistan. But anyway, as we can see, this is a decision that Biden made, and he's not taking it back. He's not apologizing. He said this has to be done. Well, we have reached the end of another edition of the Roundtable. Saula Fernandez Mendez, Pastor Phil at the controls. Hasta la próxima.